Oh,
I was
okay.
wondering if you got it.
Last week?
I sent it on Tuesday.
Probably. I might not have gotten to it yet.
Okay.
But
That's all right. I just wondered if you got it.
I'll check. I don't know if I did or not. I might have been getting so many, it's hard to keep up with them.
It's okay. It's just since I did it.
Yeah, I'll check as soon as I can. Thank you.
Some of this material is really hard to digest and incorporate into our lives. Like even like in that section that I was reading, and it talks about like honoring your teachers. Okay, but some of that like takes it to such a degree. You know, you have to walk backwards, and you have to do this. Not everybody's a good person, and they may be a teacher, but to have to honor them to such a degree. But even like the amount of time, like it talks about, the amount of time you're supposed to 9 hours a day, and you can work for 3 hours. Like 3 hours is going to be enough to support you. I mean, there's so much stuff in there, and like putting women in the class with children and people that are, because they aren't smart enough to understand this. So you don't really need to teach them.
Right.
I have a hard time with some of this.
You should. Well, that's why you're not Orthodox.
Okay.
But a lot of what you said isn't meant to be taken literally. And like, for example, there's one law that says a teacher should go out of his way not to put himself in a place where those things have to happen.
Right. Like
So,
don't so that people have to stand.
right. But it's not about the teacher. It's about the knowledge and respect for Torah.
Right.
It's nothing to do with the teacher.
Right. So
Like
I
if you had a
get- so I
teacher,
get that.
if you had a chemistry teacher or a sociology teacher, you don't have to do anything for them. Other than honor, like you would have to honor, but also you have to honor any old person
Right.
almost the same way.
Right. And that should be a respect. But you know,
Right.
but there are so many. You know, when I think about teachers in general, some of my teachers were not nice people.
Right. So the truth is, there, you have to know the entire breadth of Jewish law to know what happens in every single case. So okay. So what if there's a case where you have to honor your teacher, but you don't respect your teacher? That's a case. But we haven't gotten to that case yet.
Your father is like really that's a thing.
But is that really what it means?
I hope not.
No. Okay. So you have
Because
to.
honoring your father and mother is right up there.
Right.
And
So what you should try to do as you're reading it is take from it, not that I need to do this, but what is the law trying to... Exactly.
right. And I heard this.
What you're supposed to come away with that is not supposed to walk away and say, need to do A, B, and C. What you're supposed to walk away with that is say, we need to respect Jewish law. Even Orthodox people should walk away from that and say, we need to respect the knowledge of Torah. But you know, and the thing...
I had this debate with Gary.
Yeah.
So Gary and I are on different sort of levels of belief. And so when he gives me that, you know...
Well, he's nowhere. He's an atheist.
He rolls his eyes, and I say, but he's respectful. Because, you know, I'm conservative and David is above.
Shabbat Shalom. Good to see you. All right. Here we go. Norman had him. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot es ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini uven v'nei Yisrael oti leolam, oti leolam. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi shavat v'nafash, shavat v'nafash, shavat v'nafash. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Amen. L'chaim. Okay, Torah Study blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay, all right, so we're starting over, taking it from the top, sort of, because we're now in the second triennial cycle, which means that it's always the hardest to find where we begin, because we start in the middle third. So today, I want to show you something that I think you'll think is really exciting. It's always fun when you can go back to the parts of the Torah that you know the best and learn something new. You know, because the beginning, Genesis, you know, you come and you say, well, you know, this is the one portion. If I said to you, tell me about Matot Masai, what's your favorite parts of it? You're like, what's your favorite part of Bechukotai? What even is that? Right, but I mean, maybe you guys know, but if I say, well, what's your favorite part of Genesis? You know, the beginning. Okay, you know that story. You know what happens. But you can look at it every year and find something new. And maybe what I'm going to show you, you've seen before, but I doubt it. But you never know. Okay, so I want to focus on the creation of man today. That's where we are in the triennial cycle, and we're generally going to start here with chapter 2 of Genesis. But Norman, I misled you because I wanted to go back actually to the end of chapter 1. So if we could start today, chapter 1, verse 26. Chapter 1, verse 26 of Genesis, which is when God says, let's make the humans now. We've made everything else, and now let's make human beings. Did you find it, Norman? Yeah. Okay, so can you use the microphone? Okay, so we're at, everyone, chapter 1, verse 26. Does everyone have a sheet, a source sheet? If not, there's some more in the back, I think. Okay, here we go.
God now said, let us make human beings in our image, after our likeness, and let them hold sway over the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky, over the beasts, over the earth, over all that creeps upon the earth. So God created the human beings in the divine image, creating them in the image of God, creating them male and female. God then blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and tame it, hold sway over the fish. Excuse me.
Okay. Well, all right, so. This is, what is, it's like I paid you to ask that question. All right, so God, okay, so you saw what I wanted you to see. Yes. But there's one other thing that I wanted you to see first, which is if you look in verse 25, before we started in verse 26, but if you look in verse 25, it says, Vaya'as Elokim, God made. But there are a lot of, you could do a whole study here on the different verbs that are used in Hebrew to show the things that God does. But here it's Vaya'as. Et chayat haaretz, right, the animals, the beasts, lamina, of every kind, veta behema, and the cattle type animals, lamina, of each kind, ve'kol remes, and everything that creeps, ha'adama. What's adama? Earth. Adama. What's the name of the first person? Which in Hebrew is Adam. So you hear that Adama and Adam are the same root, right? What's the difference? The hey at the end, which signifies what? That's an interesting take. Yeah, I mean, you could offer that, but grammatically, Adam is male, Adama is. So something that was already in the world, Adama, combined with Adam to make the female person. Right? You see, so what we see here is, if you think that this is the first political race where humanity's been confused about gender, we've been confused about gender for a very long time. And for example, when it first says, and God created Adam, it says, and God created them, right? So we know that Adam was born with male and female organs, and eventually, God took part of Adam, the rib or whatever. The Hebrew word is tsalah. He took the rib or whatever tsalah represents and made Eve out of it, right? So took part of Adam's body. Okay, now, so that's the first thing I want to show you. Let's just keep that in our mind for later. Okay, so now you asked the very good question. Vayomer Elokim, God says, Naaseh Adam b'tzalmenu kidmotenu. So let us make man. So you asked the question, who's us? So the rest of the verse gives us a little bit more information, but not necessarily enough to answer the question. But we need the next two words. B'tzalmenu kidmotenu. In our image, like our likeness. And the rabbis often agree that this means God speaking to the angels. Why? Because the only other people they're only not people, but the only other beings that are around, he's not talking to the animals. The animals wouldn't understand, or couldn't be part of that process. Now, if that's the case, what do the angels contribute? Or what is it about the angels that's in our image or our likeness? What's angelic about humanity? Our nails? I don't know. Maybe. I think. Do animals not have nails?
No, but they said that the angels didn't have skin. It was more like a transparent, like nails.
Ah, okay.
So that's the closest thing that we have left.
Okay. Very nice. Very, very nice. So I don't know. I mean, I know what some rabbis have posited over the generations, but I don't know that it's necessarily agreed upon. But let's think about angels for a second. What do we know about angels? So we're going to have this story where Abraham eventually is going to be sitting out at his tent, and 3 angels walk by. Where are those angels going? Sodom and Gomorrah. Why? Why? To destroy it. Okay, so listen to what we just said. There's 3 angels. They're on their way to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. We know that's not accurate, right? How many of the 3 actually go to Sodom and Gomorrah? 2. I think I might have I brought that verse. If you look at the second source on the sheet, it says 2. One to destroy Adam. One to destroy Sodom, and the other one to rescue Lot. It was he who had come to heal Abraham, while the third, who had come to make the announcement to Sarah, had departed as soon as he had carried out his mission. What do you learn from... So Rashi says 2. What do you mean 2? And if you look in Genesis 19, verse 1, it says 2 of the angels went on their way to Sodom. So he says, well, weren't there 3? So Rashi says, well, the reason there 3 came was because one of them, his job was to tell Sarah, you're going to get pregnant. After that, he went back to heaven or wherever he goes. The other 2 still had a mission. One was to destroy Sodom, and the other was to rescue Lot. Okay, now he's like the healer. His name was Raphael, Refuah Shlema. He's the healer. So he healed Abraham first because Abraham was just circumcised, so he healed Abraham. Then he went to heal Lot and save Lot. But the other one, his only job was to destroy Sodom. So he was there to go destroy Sodom. And the third angel, he went back to heaven. This was Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael, right? The turtles. The Donatello, he didn't show up. But the rest of the turtles were there. All right. Okay, so if you look at the first source is a midrash. Genesis Rabbah. Rabbah only has 1 H. Yours has 2. But that's a misprint. By the way, I think I've told you I'm teaching at University of Miami this semester, and we had the midterm the other day. And one of the questions had to do with how did the early Christians see Jews, and how did that develop, for the first 4 or 5 centuries, and what were the Christian perspectives? But there was a typo, and instead of Christian, it came out Christina. So one of the kids raised his hand and said, "Who's Christina?" So I said, "Have you ever heard of a typo?" So it says Christian. But so I said, "But if any of you know someone named Christina who has strong feelings about Jews, you're welcome to write about that too." Nobody did. So, okay, so don't let the second hey get to you. It's not the second H get to you. It's nothing for... all right, Edith, would you mind reading Genesis Rabbah 21:5? Rabbi Pappus.
Rabbi Pappus expounded, "Behold, the man has become as one of us, like one of the ministering angels." Rabbi Akiva said to him, "Enough, Pappus." He said to him, "How then do you explain, 'Behold, the man has become as one of us'?" He said to him that the Holy One, blessed be he, gave him two paths, the path of life and the path of death, and he selected for himself another path. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Simon said, "Like the unique one of the world, as it is stated, 'Hear, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one,' in Deuteronomy 6:4. The rabbis say, like Gabriel, as it is stated, 'And behold, one man dressed in linen,' Daniel 10:5, like this grasshopper whose garment is an intrinsic part of him."
Okay, so Rabbi Akiva has a question. And the question is, all right, so you're telling, well, Rabbi Pappus comes and says, what does it mean that man is, but salmenu kidmutenu, right? Which is what we have in verse 20, where was it? 27, right? No, wait, that's not it. 26. Vayomer Elokim, God says, Naaseh Adam, let us, plural, make man, but salmenu, in our image, or bekidmutenu, in our likeness. Now, kidmutenu, ke means like, and nu at the end means us. But demut, the word demut, in the middle means likeness. So the likeness of, in our likeness, the likeness of the angels. So Rav Papa says, you know what that means? That means like one of the angels. Because who's God talking to? He's talking to the angels. Let's make them like us. Let's make them like the angels. That's probably what we've always learned. Right? Okay, fine. Rabbi Akiva says, hold on a second. Angels, when there were three angels, so we need to know something about the nature of angels. Why? Because there's a conversation between God and the angels. And if we're going to make us like the angels, well, what does that mean? Okay. So there's one thing we know about angels is there were three, then there were two. And when there were two, it's because they each had a job left to do. So the one who finished his job, he went back. So angels can only do what they're programmed to do. Right? We've talked about this, I think, before. If you're an angel, you can only do what you're told. So if you're the angel who's there to heal, and the other angel says, listen, I know you're here to heal, but I might need a little help destroying Sodom. So you're going to be part of that. That could never happen. The other angel says, look, I heal. That's it. Yeah, I once heard this story. There was this running back. The coach said to him, we need you to get 2 yards on this play. And the player said, Coach, I'll get you 3. Or I can get you 3. Great. Next play. We need you to get us 4 yards on this play. Coach, I can get you 3. That's all I can do. Right? That's all I can do. I can get you 3 yards. But that's what angels are. They each have their role, and that's all they do. So they're always something. I hate to give this away this early. You know what? I'm not going to give it away. But that's what we know about angels. That they're programmed to do what they're supposed to do. All right, so let's look at one more Rashi here. We will make, did we read that one already? No. Third source on the sheet. Oh, yeah, sorry, Annabelle. Can you use a mic, please? So they can hear you at home?
I think that my conception of an angel doesn't have a physical body. An angel is spiritual.
For sure.
So when God says, let us make man in our image, I am assuming that God has an aspect of physicality, which would mean that we have both a physical aspect, like God, and we would have a spiritual aspect, like the angels.
You're on the right track. Wrong train, but the right track. But this is the direction that we need to go.
So the angels would be like robots without AI.
Yeah,
So Judy has an angelic smile. Is that important?
it's helpful. It's helpful. So, all right. Okay, let's read the next Rashi on 126. So, Naaseh Adam, this is the phrase we've been talking about. Let us make man. So, what does Rashi say about let us make man? Look at.
One thing, if I may first.
Sure.
At one point, though, we know God has a back because Moses sees his back.
Oh, we talked about that. We talked about that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
But we talked about what that really meant.
Well, but it also goes along with perhaps what Annabella was saying, that there is a physical aspect or something that man can perceive
Yeah,
about God.
sure. I mean, the whole point there, that was a different class, but the whole point was to see the knot in the back of God's tefillin and ask the question, why does God wear tefillin? And then to say, well, God doesn't really wear tefillin, but what's it trying to teach us? So I think that's probably more metaphor. But Maimonides would say it's more metaphor. Anyone who came before it would not, and probably excommunicate Maimonides for saying that, but it depends what you believe. Alex? Can you pass a mic to Alex? The mics are not for this room. They're for people who are watching at home so they can hear you too. Because I don't know, you guys don't know this, but there's literally millions of people all over the world watching.
Great, so someone will listen to me.
Right.
So I'd always heard that first there's the difference of the verb tense that's being used, right? The animals and all those things came forth from the earth, whereas this is God or God and the angels creating man. But the likeness doesn't have to be the physicality. It could actually be the ability that we have free will to make decisions of what's right, what's wrong, and be partners in creation.
Very good. And I think that's what Rashi says, and that's a general opinion we're going to look at here in a second with Rashi. But the idea is that one of the differences between the main differences, I mean, I was sort of alluding to it, is angels can't sin. They can't do anything wrong. They can only do what they're programmed to do. Whereas we have free will. So, right. Roberta, did you have a question? Can you use the mic?
Just an observation that I always forget when I read this, God's not alone. The angels already existed, and so that is always a light bulb for me, because when I think about creation, I think only about God, but this is a reminder that there were angels.
Yes.
And then the other thing is they do come in different forms. Sometimes they do come looking like, men and they're clothed.
That's right.
Right.
Sometimes they come looking, they could take the force of like a donkey. Remember the story of Balak. Now, the Talmud talks about a handful of different things that were created during creation that are not mentioned in the Torah. One of them is the angels. There's a whole list of a variety of things that were created during creation that are not, they're alluded to, they're hinted at in the Torah, but they're not explicit. One of them is that during creation, before humanity, that the angels were created. Oh yeah, Jay, can you grab that mic? It's for the people at home. They'll never hear it. They're all over the world. They'll never hear it.
Hello, world. If man is to be like angels, then wouldn't the question be, what is our task?
For sure. But so it's very simple, actually, because angels have one command. Jews have 613. And that's it. Our task is to do the will of the Torah. I didn't make it up, but
it's a very simple context. Right now, when
no, but let me just say one thing just before Sherry says, when Moses goes up to get the Torah, and the angels say, "How can you give the Torah to them? They're just going to break it." And Moses says to them, "What do you know about the Torah? When were you slaves? When do you have to keep kosher? When do you have to get circumcised? And the angels are like, good point. You know, because they're not bound by the mitzvahs. They don't do them. There's no moil in heaven, slicing up the angels. They don't have it, right? That's one of our mitzvahs. So why would the angels get the Torah? They don't do the mitzvahs. They don't keep kosher because they don't eat, right?
But the thing is, in the context of where it's been taken, make God in our image, they're in the Garden of Eden. They haven't sinned yet.
We're going to get to that. Hang on. That's the last source, the Ibn Ezra on 2:15. We're going to talk about what goes on in the Garden of Eden. Yeah.
So we talk about God, whether physical, spiritual. When Abraham and all the other prophets have a vision of God, does that factor into it? I mean, the vision is of the physical nature or spiritual nature. Is this somewhere in there that if you have a vision,
Right.
he has to portray himself somehow to you?
Yeah. I mean, look, all of the prophets, none of them saw God, even Moses. I mean, there's the image, okay, he saw God's back. Moses asks to see God, and God says, no. Can I see your face? And God says, no one can see my face and live. All the other prophets only had dreams and visions. They didn't actually even have conversations. The only one who actually had a real-time conversation is Moses. That's how the Torah ends. There was never a prophet who spoke to God face-to-face like Moses did, right? So they might have perceived in their mind what God looked like, but they couldn't have known. It's not a thing a human can know. All right, let's go on. Okay, so now Rashi on 126. This is the third source on the sheet.
We will make man, the meekness of the Holy One, blessed be he. They, the rabbis, learn from here. Because the man is in the likeness of the angels, and they might envy him, therefore he took counsel with them. Let's see where we are. And when he judges the kings, he likewise consults with his heavenly council. For thus we find in the case of Ahab, to whom Micah said, I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left. Has God then a right hand and a left hand? But it means that some stood on the right side to plead in favor of the accused, and others stood on the left side to accuse. And similarly, we read in Daniel, the matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the sentence by the word of the holy ones. Here also he consulted his heavenly council and asked permission of them, saying to them, there are in the heavens beings after my likeness. If there will not be on earth also beings after my likeness, there will be envy among all the beings that I have created.
Okay, so this is a problem here. Here's the problem. What Rashi's pointing out from the Talmud is that if God's saying to the angels, let us make man b'tsalmenu, in our image, in our form, how come humans don't look anything like God or like angels? The word is form. Demut is how you look. We don't look like angels. We don't act like angels. I mean, we eat, we drink, we're commanded to do different things. We sure as heck don't look like God. So what does it really even make sense to say that we're in the form of angels? And by the way, he's not saying let us make man in the form of angels. He's saying let's make man in our image, meaning what is it that angels and God have in common? And that's what we're created by one characteristic that angels and God have in common. Because angels and God are different beings. So if God says, let us make man in our image, well, what do they have in common? We're not sure yet. Now we've created more questions than answers. We've made more problems. Okay, now, we do have some help, though. And the help is, Sherry pointed out, what happens in the Garden of Eden. Because there is a moment, only 3 hours, according to the Midrash, Adam and Eve were only in the Garden of Eden for 3 hours before they ate from the fruit. Did I tell you what the fruit was? It was a different class I was speaking to about it. So everyone, this is like the greatest trivia question of all time. I remember someone asked me this when my first year of rabbinic school, I was in Israel. And I came back knowing almost nothing about Torah. I learned a lot of Hebrew. I learned a little bit, but it was like the first year is like kindergarten. You go to Israel really just to learn Hebrew and to get to know Israel, and it's really easy. Then you come back for 4 years, and it gets a lot harder. But in between the first year and my second year, I spent a year working at a summer camp as like the Jewish studies guy, where a few years earlier I was like the tennis guy. And the only difference between me then and now was between when I was the tennis guy and the Jewish studies guys was I wasn't as good as tennis anymore. That was about the only difference. But so there was this Israeli guy there, and he said, "Oh, you're a rabbinic student." And I said, "Yeah, but don't read too much into that. I was only been there 1 year. I haven't really learned anything yet." And he would always ask me questions, and I never knew the answers to the questions. And I was embarrassed about it. Many times over the last 25 years, I said, I wish I could run into him now. I've got better answers. But I say 98% of what I know about Torah I've learned after rabbinic school, but maybe 99. One of the questions he asked me is, so what fruit is it that Adam and Eve eats? So I said, it's an apple. So he's like, well, I just happen to have a Tanakh here. It was before phones, and he said, show me where it says apple. I'm like, oh, it's got to be in there. So I find it. Guess what? It says pre-eitz, the fruit of the tree. Later on, in Christian iconography, they started painting apples. But it doesn't say apple anywhere. It says pre-eitz, the fruit of the tree. And later on in Leviticus, when they're describing the etrog, it also says the same words. And the rabbis generally believe that while you could argue it's a fig because they cover themselves up with fig leaves right after they eat from it, it was probably an etrog. And there are a variety of other Kabbalistic reasons why, but it was probably the etrog that they were eating, which is really, there are actually some textual, not even Kabbalistic, but some really textual references as well that make you think that maybe it was an etrog, which is kind of fun.
We should have that.
What?
We should have that.
I gave that talk a few days ago. I don't remember where. But yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it. Maybe next Sukkot. Okay, if you look with me, Genesis 2:15. There's an interesting verse about the Garden of Eden. So why did I bring that up? Because I needed to waste time to get to 10 o'clock. No, the reason I bring that up is because there was a moment in time where humanity existed like the angels. And that was the 3 hours that Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden. Because for those 3 hours, they didn't have to do anything. Everything came to them automatically. They didn't have to believe in one God because they couldn't not believe in one God. They were programmed like the angels until they weren't. And that's when God gave them the choice to say, all right, you don't have to do anything. You don't even know what embarrassment or negativity is. That's why you don't realize you're naked. And as soon as they ate from the tree, they got embarrassed and started making clothes. But before they ate from the tree, the one they weren't supposed to eat from, it was at least the closest you could get to humanity living like the angels. And it only lasted for 3 hours. And basically they said, we don't like it. We're out of here. But look at verse 2:15, because 2:15 is a very strange verse. Everyone have it? Judy, do you have it? Could you read that one verse? So wait, before I say that, God, we said at the beginning, before I introduced this verse, in Hebrew, Adam is Adam. Happens to be my middle name. that means nothing. I mean, that doesn't help for the purposes of this class. It just is. I mean, unless you want to know that it still is unnamed. Adam is Adam, or meaning, anyone know how to say human being in Hebrew? Ben Adam, the son of Adam, right? You're a human because you're Ben Adam, right? Ground is Adama, which makes it you think that Adam was made from the dirt in the Garden of Eden, right? How many of you would buy that? That God just like took the dirt, and that's why that's why man is called Adam, because Adam means soil. That's what it means in modern Hebrew. Adama means soil. That's what God's created. We used to tell kids, if you rub your hands like this and then you see the dirt, that's because we're all made out of soil. It's because they hadn't washed their hands in 6 months. But that's what that means. Okay, so you ready to be amazed? From where does God make Adam? Without looking, from where does God make Adam? From where does God make Adam? Where does he get the stuff to make Adam?
Don't know.
Well, if it's not... yeah. If it's not the soil... if it's not the soil, why is his name soil? I mean, isn't that the general belief that God took something and but if you look at this verse 15, God took the man that he created somewhere else outside the Garden of Eden and placed him in the Garden of Eden. Adam was not born or created, or however you want to say it, in the Garden of Eden. God made Adam somewhere else that we don't know, and then had him and took him and put him in the garden. Isn't that incredible?
It says for him to till it.
Oh, okay, so now we're going to get there. So now we ask the question. If we read the rest of this verse, God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden. Now, in Hebrew it says, Le'ovda u'leshomra. Now, these are words you might know. La'avod, to work. But la'avod in biblical Hebrew can also mean what? To serve, but how? To offer a sacrifice, right? You know, we say, Al ha-Torah ve'al ha-avodah ve'al gimilut chasadim. Al ha-Torah, the world is on 3 pillars. Al ha-Torah, on Torah. Al gimilut chasadim, on acts of kindness. Ve'al avodah, and on service to God, meaning sacrifices. Or, as the rabbis in the Talmud changed sacrifices to worship. But sacrifice, avodah today means worship. But in biblical Hebrew, avodah means sacrifices. Okay? God says, you were avadim, you were servants to Pharaoh. Now you will vaya avduni. Now you will come and serve me. Well, how did we serve God? We offered sacrifices. Right? So that's what that means. So here it says, but there were no sacrifices in the Garden of Eden. So what it says is, la'ovda, you're going to work, ulishomra. Shomra, shomer, Shabbat. What? To guard. So now we ask the question. Verse 15 says, God took, by the way, it says, Vaikach Hashem Elokim. 2 names for God. Why 2 names for God here? We don't often have that during the story of creation. What do we know about the 2 names from God? The E source and the J source. Why 2 names? One represents din and one represents rachamim. One represents justice and one represents mercy. Right? The E, Elokim, in the Torah represents God's attribute of justice. And the 4-letter name for God, what we call the tetragrammaton, represents God's rachamim, his mercy. Okay, so we have both names here. So God of justice and mercy took Adam and he placed him in the Began Eden, in the Garden of Eden, to till it and to guard it. Okay, so guard it, I'm not sure what that means, but he had to do something. But the problem that we have is he's not supposed to have to work. To till the soil is his punishment for what he's going to have to do once he eats from the fruit. Before he eats from the fruit, why are we told here that he has to till it? So the Ibn Ezra, right, the 12th century Spain, very famous rabbi, his commentary explains it. So if you look at the bottom of the sheet, what does it say to till it? Ken, would you mind reading the Ibn Ezra?
To till it, le'ovdah, therefore refers to the garden of whose fruit he ate. It was only after he sinned that he had to eat the grass of the ground, that is, bread. To till it means to water it. To keep it means to guard the garden so that no animals enter therein and befoul it. Some say that le'ovdah means to serve God's commandment. However, a commandment is not served.
Right, so whatever he had to do, he had to not only make sure that he didn't eat from it and that Eve didn't eat from it, but the animals didn't eat from it either. And by the way, who's the one that convinces them to eat from it? An animal, right? The snake, the nachash, which becomes the snake. So we're not exactly sure what it means to till it. But the Ibn Ezra is saying, look, it doesn't mean he had to, fertilize it and, weed it and, do all those kinds of things. But there was something with protecting it or paying extra attention to it, that it didn't get harmed in some way, that he had to do. Now, Sforno has another take on it. If you look on the next page, Sforno is 1500s from Italy. He says, what does it mean to till it? Or la'avod, which can also mean to worship, a reference to perfecting his own personality, that which was supplied by God in as yet unrefined state, the one called neshamat chaim, which means like the soul of life. Okay, so what the Sforno says is, it's not so much that he had to, worry about the physical nature of the things in the garden. His job was to refine his soul. He didn't have a physical nature really to worry about. There was nothing physical he needed to worry about. He didn't have, so like when we say we have to control our physical desires, he didn't have those. He wouldn't have known what those were until after he ate from the fruit. He didn't know about negative things. He was only a soulful being, and his job was to just pay attention to that. Okay, so what I'm saying is, this is the one period of time where we had humanity who kind of knew what it was like to be like the angels. Not exactly, but kind of. I mean, at least closer than after the fruit was eaten and they got kicked out of the garden and we live in the world that we live in. By the way, the world we live in, not so great. Yeah.
I've got a question. Adam, we're told that man is placed in the garden in line 8.
Yeah.
The Lord God planted a garden in the east and placed there the man whom he had formed. Then we get him later in 15 or 16, in 15. Then we're told, again, he placed him in the garden. And I'm wondering why it's repeated there.
Okay, so there's two stories of creation. The first story is about the body, but how he creates the body. The second one is about the soul, because the way the second story ends is that God breathed his soul into them. And so the first story is meant to teach us that God created our body, but the second story is meant to teach us that God put a soul inside each one of us.
But it says he breathed life into him in line 7.
Okay.
And then he gives him a task in line 15.
Right.
But I just wonder why it's separated and why they, I guess the fact that he's created once, then we get more of the story of other creation of the river.
Well, yeah, no, so you have the two stories, but then God breathes the soul into him, and once he breathes the soul into him, then he's able to function and make decisions about whether he wants to do what he wants to do in the Garden of Eden. And we know how it ended up. I think. I don't have any better answer than that.
He breathes life into him and he becomes a living being.
Right.
In line 7.
Right.
And then God plants the garden. It's questionable here because he plants the garden and then puts the man in it. And it's not, we don't get a purpose for the man until several lines later.
That's true.
I think what she's referring to is that first you have the physical body, and then you have to, if you nurture it and create the spiritual body, and what Adam and he learns while he's in the garden is that in order to be human, you have to have both. And so one alludes to the physical, and one alludes to the spiritual. And then once he's kicked out, the whole purpose is to create the world like a Garden of Eden.
Okay. Roberta? Can you pass the mic to Roberta? Someone?
So the angels only have one mission and they can't sin. And so for the 3 hours that they're in Gan Eden, they're made in the image of the angels and God. They can't sin, and they have one mission, which is the word that we're struggling with, to till, whatever that is. To me, that's what I'm looking at, how I'm thinking of it. And what is it? Is it a physical, like you have to till, you have to water? Or is it a spiritual, you have to elevate your soul, and you're doing your soul work, right?
Right.
And
According to
then-
Sforno, yes.
Right. So which is it? Or maybe it's a combination. And then they get expelled from Eden. They eat from the tree of we don't know what, and they get expelled. And to me, it's like breaking the glass at a wedding. Like, it all shatters, right? You still have that one mission. You're expelled from Gan Eden, but you still have that one mission, perfect your soul. But now you have to do it differently because all your pieces are all broken.
Ah, very
And
nice.
Our whole world, that 613 commandments, is the guidebook on how to put those pieces together.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I love that.
My oldest son, we were discussing it, and he said he figured it out.
Oh.
I said, what do you mean? He says, Adam sinned over there. They ate the fruit, and now Adam is being expelled from the Garden of Eden. So my son says, Gabriel then speaks to God. How can you do that? They don't know anything. They're going to have to go out. They're going to have to get food and everything. How are they going to survive? And God says, I've given them a sense of humor and the ability of introspection.
Okay. Okay.
Rabbi?
I know plenty of people without a sense of humor, but I've been working on that for years. But, yeah. Al.
Two ecological questions emerge from these passages. The first question is, when did man take on the responsibility of protecting the world? And the other question is, when did man have the capacity to destroy the world? And was that the true manifestation of his charges in the Garden of Eden?
Very nice.
And
Very,
many people differ on
Yeah.
their answer to those two questions.
very nice. Very nice. Okay, so I only have a couple minutes left, and I want to get to the answer. Well, an answer. You don't have to buy it, but an answer. If you just skip with me to verse 22, chapter 2, verse 22. Now, Adam, if you agree with the verse, and you're willing to agree that Adam was not created in the Garden of Eden, that Adam was created outside the Garden of Eden, and as the verse very clearly states, God took him and then put him in the Garden of Eden, then there's only one person who was created in the Garden of Eden, and that is Eve. So Adam and Eve come from two different worlds. Right? Yeah. I didn't mean that as a joke, but I mean, it is funny. But it's true. We don't know where Adam was created. We know that God created him somewhere else and then put him in the Garden of Eden. But we know that Eve, on her passport, does say Eden. Right? Unoccupied. Garden of Eden. All right. See, I tell you, not everyone has a sense of humor. All right. So look at verse 22. Look at verse 22. And God And by the way, here we have the two names of God again. Vayiven Hashem Elokim. And God built. Look at the word that God uses to describe Eve. He built her, right? But if you know the word vayiven, livnot, a binyan in Hebrew, it's a building. Livnot is to build. Vayiven, and he built. Hashem Elokim. God did it with his din and his rachamim. By the way, angels don't need din or rachamim. They don't get judged. Right? There is no din or rachamim for angels. They don't need to get judged because they can only do what they're programmed to do, and that's what they do, and there's no reason to judge them. It's humanity, when Adam was built and when Eve is built, that they need to be built with din and rachamim because they get judged. Right? By the way, I learned something really cool in the Talmud this week. Do you know that God, we rest on Shabbat because God rested on Shabbat. So there are only a few things that God really does anymore. One of, he created everything in the world. He still makes matches. That's what the Midrash says. What does God do all day? He picks who should be married with who. But the other thing is he judges the people who are in hell. He judges the people who are in hell. Once you're in heaven, you're with God. There's nothing to be judged. But when you're in hell, God's still judging you. So what happens in hell is, like here's what Hitler does every day. He wakes up, they bring him out, they burn him at the stake, and it's like an unpleasant day. And then he dies, and then Tuesday wakes up, and they do it again, and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And they get to Saturday, there's no judgment in hell on Saturday. God's off. He's not working. He doesn't show up. So they say to him, just hang out in your cell. We're not going to burn you at the stake today. Relax, do what you want to do. Come back tomorrow, we'll get to burning you all over again. But you have the day off. There's no punishment in hell on Shabbos. I thought that was interesting. Give him the day off. Say, you know what? Come back tomorrow, come back Sunday. We'll get right back to it. But, okay, so, all right, that's in Sanhedrin, page 65. But you have to look at the Rashi if you want to get that explanation. All right, anyway, I thought that was cool. So, okay, verse 22, God built the side that he had taken from man into a woman, and he brought her to the man. And the man said, okay, and he said, this is the bone of my bones, the flesh of my flesh. This shall be called woman, for from the man she was taken. And there it is. Eve is born or created in Eden. Look at Ibn Ezra, second to the last source on the sheet. It says this, and brought her. On verse 22, on that phrase in the Torah, Ibn Ezra says, when Adam awoke from his sleep, he thought that the woman was brought before him, as the animals were brought before him. So Adam woke up from anesthesia. Remember, God put him in a deep sleep.